What is going on, Colts Nation, and welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice. Well, guys, week 2 is here. Indianapolis Colts are hosting the Denver Broncos here for week 2. Both teams come in with 1-0 records. I want to welcome on from Believe in Broncos. We got Bree, and we also have our friend Pat as well joining us. How you doing, guys? How you feeling here? Football's finally back.
Yeah, absolutely excited to be here. Week 2 is off and running, and it feels like it's going at an incredible pace already. We saw what was to be sort of a letdown in week 1, but that's how it goes. You're temperature checking your opponents. You're trying to figure out where you fit into the key, and you're shaking off a ton of rust, and that's what we've seen the Broncos go through. It'll be interesting to see if you've seen some parallels there with the Colts. But Pat, how are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Happy to be here. Football season is in full swing. High school football, college, pro now. It's best time of the year. It's like Christmas for us. But yeah, I will definitely repeat that sentiment. It's week 1, like weeks 1 through 3 are always kind of tough to gauge because it's, we're trying out new things. Week 1 kind of felt like that 4th preseason game where things were still kind of sloppy and got to clean it up. But football's back. Nothing to complain about there.
Absolutely. Well, guys, with football being back, be sure to go check out our sponsor, FanDuel, with all your betting needs there. Well, guys, let's get into this because you mentioned, week 1 a little bit sloppy for Denver, playing the Tennessee Titans and obviously came in with a victory. What were your impressions there? A week 1 for the Broncos and moving forward, what are you hoping to see from Denver that maybe you were a little bit disappointed with, or you were hoping to see a little bit more here in week 1? We'll start with Pat.
Yeah, I think for Broncos fans, the hype surrounding the offseason was so massive, and not just from local media, but like national media as well. Kind of the first time since the early Peyton Manning days that there's been this like, ooh, are they a Super Bowl contender kind of hype? And I think it just kind of led to some really lofty expectations coming out of training camp. Preseason was not did not see a lot of like growth or like anything explosive that would be like, oh, I think we're almost there. And week 1 just kind of repeated that. Offense looked really sloppy at times. Throwing the ball 40 times in week 1 does not seem like it's going to work. We would have loved to see the run game get going a little bit more, but I think just, the overall performance of Bo Nix probably left Broncos fans a little worried about a sophomore slump, which was always in the back of their minds. But I think it's week 1, like we said, it's still kind of shaking off some of the rust. So there were still some good things, but all in all, it was a little sloppy. Tennessee's defense is no slouch, though. I think that definitely needs to be stated. Like, this was a team that was very, very good defensively last season, just gave up a lot of points because of a really bad offensive situation. But all in all, that defense is very well coached. They're very thick up front. 2 C's on that. So it was a tough game to watch at some points, but all in all, still left really promising. That defense, though, Bree, you got to break it down for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to point out, Pat, your point about the Titans and their front 7 specifically just bullying the Broncos and their offensive line that should have a lot of continuity that should be anchoring them. And it's really not. It unsettled them. It deeply unsettled Bo Nix. And when you talk about offensive turnovers, when you're talking about 4 of them and 3 of which were Bo Nix's fault, it's costly against any team, really. And the Titans were able to take control of that, but just not nearly enough. So they have to clean that up. Sloppy is absolutely the word I would use here. A very inconsistent offensive rhythm. And Pat, you talked about it. Like, why are we not starting the run much earlier? Because the first half looks sloppy, and then you really underutilize what is supposed to take that emphasis off of Bo Nix. You're supposed to be helping him through his sophomore season, and instead you really kind of set him up to struggle. And unfortunately, where Bo Nix's head seems to go go, is having to rescue himself from that situation instead of finding it within himself to play his best football. And we really saw that. Obviously, it's your home game debut. That's not what you wanted to get from week one, but I think it's going to right itself. I think Bo Nix has what it takes to really learn from that mistake and go exponentially kind of further below expectations. But that's where you get yourself in trouble as a fan and an analyst, is you say, well, it should have looked a lot different, and it didn't. So I want to say, first and foremost, let's really get it straight here. It wasn't just sort of sloppy. It was very ugly. And there were some special teams miscues as well. So that really puts you at a disadvantage when it comes to field position and those moments of momentum. But the key takeaway, Pat, you already talked about it. The Broncos defense was responsible for, I think, 29 quarterback pressures, which was the most in the league for week one. And I think when you put a Broncos defense that's that scary against a rookie QB, they made life very difficult for Cam Ward. So I think if they continue to apply that constant pressure, they rack up the sacks and they force quarterbacks to hold on to the ball longer, it's really going to be a test for both experienced and inexperienced quarterbacks. So I want to shout from the rooftops that I fully have vested in this Broncos defense, and it's being tested behind some injuries. We don't have Drake Greenlaw out there, which will take it to the next level. But keep in mind, and everyone who's watching, watch out for the name Talanoa Hufanga, because he will cause problems for anybody who is in front of him. So I just want to wrap that up in a pretty bow and say, yeah, it was a pretty stinky offensive start for the Denver Broncos. But as Pat said, this is an extension of the preseason. They got the win. It's not the same as it is in college football. Like you don't got to feel moral obligation against what felt like a dirty win. You get to be propelled forward. So this week 2 really feels like the opportunity to measure up to the rest of the league, where the Colts have faced similar circumstances in week 1, right? Like you're going against a depleted Miami squad who really seems to be disintegrating in front of us. What does week 2 have in store for these two teams? It's an opportunity to measure up on where you are in the league.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense there. I am kind of curious going back to just that defense of the Denver Broncos, what you were able to do against Cam Ward and really making him uncomfortable all day long. It seemed like, and I know Miami obviously talked about it, there's a lot going on there. But I would say, and from what people had said, one of their strengths was their front seven, was those pass rushers. You had Bradley Chubb, you have Chop Robinson, you had Matt Judon, to name a few. And I thought for the most part, outside I think one sack, the Colts held Daniel Jones pretty clean. There was multiple times where he had a lot of time to throw. So I am kind of curious on that, how you guys view that, because it does seem to me like sort of a strength-on-strength situation here where you have two units that played really well. Broncos getting after the quarterback, Colts protecting the quarterback. What do you think is going to be the key here for this matchup? And Colts have a couple new starters in there, but also they do have guys like Quentin Nelson. They do have Bernard Ryman, who's I think a really good left tackle, and Braden Smith, a pretty good right tackle when he's healthy. So how do you guys think that's going to play out? And what do you think the key is for both teams in order to maybe come away being the victor of this battle?
Yeah, you said it well. Even though Miami has some pretty big name pass rushers, Daniel Jones only pressured 8 times, 1 sack out of those 8 pressures. So offensive line kept him really clean, which I think maybe that's the first time in his entire career where he's like, oh, I have time to throw. But I think that's going to be something that Vance Joseph kind of comes into this game with, like, okay, they only got to him 8 times, really. And we have a lot more weapons and a lot more creativity across the defensive front. Them using Jahdae Barron sparingly in this last game, but like the way that they used him was so Vance Joseph, like bringing nickel blitzes, these different design pressures that are meant to confuse even the smartest of quarterbacks. I think that's something that Vance Joseph does really, really well. Obviously, we saw that last year. This was the most blitz-heavy team in the league. Produced like top 5 pressures, top 5 sacks. I think that's going to be the emphasis here. Nick Bonito was a man playing on fire last week. 40% win rate in his pass rush like one of the highest ever recorded pass rush win rates. I have to say that slowly because it's kind of hard to say fast. But I think that they have lit a fire under this defense, paying the guys that they did, Zach Allen, Benito, making sure that these guys know that they're taken care of. Now they're playing for something bigger than just the paycheck. And I think that's going to be that mentality that they're going to bring in. And it is a true, like, okay, hey, like big on big type of situation. You just had a week where your quarterback was kept pretty much completely clean. Now you're going up against a defense that was arguably a top 3 defense last year. One of the best pass rush defenses in the league last year. How are we going to measure up to it? He was blitzed 20 times, Daniel Jones, last week. I think that number's probably going to be closer to 30, 40 this week. So a lot more pressure, a lot more disguised looks. It's going to be a tough day for Daniel Jones, but this offensive line if they can pull together a game like they did against Miami, it's going to be tough because he'll find those open spaces. And if they can just get the quicks out, I think he'll have a pretty decent day, but expect a lot of pressure. That's what I would say.
Sure.
Yeah, I think you absolutely have to, because Broncos defense is built to suffocate offense, and you don't allow them to become comfortable. And we've talked about it, week 1 against Tennessee, you got 6 sacks, constant pressure, and just the unsettled part of it all. But I think against the Colts, it's going to be starting fast. The key to it is to have Daniel Jones as uncomfortable as possible, because he is a rhythm quarterback. So if he is able to express those quick reads and he's able to have the time throws, then he's going to move the sticks. And I think that's where Denver is going to have to play catch up when it comes to defensively. But if they bring the pressure early on and they do what Vance Joseph does best and really is just throwing everything you possibly can in a metered and strategic approach, I think that collapsing the pocket and forcing Jones really off script is what the Colts are going to have to pay attention to and be cognizant of. But you asked what the keys to the game are going to be, and I think that it's really the turnover margin and the time of possession, because you have to be so very infrequently careless with the ball. And we saw what happens when you do. I'm still shocked that Denver was able to pull off a win, simply because you don't normally see endings like that to that scary of football. But Daniel Jones isn't likely to give that many second chances. So if the Broncos don't play clean football, I could see Jones going in and really taking the extra possessions given to them. It's a road game for us. Like, you can't overlook how important that is when it comes to momentum and the way the ball bounces on any given Sunday. So really setting yourself up for success comes from not shooting yourself in the foot. And I think as long as Denver is able to resist that urge, then they're going to be able to play their best football.
I think too, they only ran 2 screens last week, the Colts did. And that's an area where you're facing a team that likes to bring a lot of blitzes and bring a lot of pressure. That screen game is going to be something that might work for them this week. So I think that's like just one of those adjustment things, right? Like, we didn't face a team that brought exquisite pressures in week 1, but now we kind of have to watch out for that in week 2. I expect the screen game to be really involved, especially if, Daniel Jones was 7 for 7 going to his left side in between the line of scrimmage and 10 yards. So the quick reads, screen game is going to be on point. I think there's a chance that they could catch Denver sleeping in defense a couple times, but it's going to be really tough with Riley Moss and PS2 out there on the field for them to pass the ball downfield. So it's got to be quick, hit them with the screen game, try and kill them when they're bringing that pressure.
Yeah, well, as long as they don't throw you all remember last year, as long as they don't throw a screen pass back to the quarterback, I'll be happy with that. That was rough. But Bree, I want to ask you, I want to kind of stay with this Colts offense real fast here. So Colts, I mean, on paper, to me, and I'm curious how you guys view it, seems like the Colts have a lot of weapons in their offensive arsenal. They have the receivers they have guys like Michael Pittman, who, had the touchdown last week. They have Alec Pierce, who last year was the leader in yards per reception in the NFL. They have Josh Downs in the slot, who does what he does. And then they add a guy like Tyler Warren into the mix. How do you view the matchup here between these Indianapolis receivers? And / just pass catchers in general, and this Broncos defense, which did invest a first-round pick into a corner. How do you view this matchup here and some of these players on players here, potentially strength on strength again?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a great point to start on and really emphasize, because if you're going to talk about how great the defense is, let's isolate the secondary and see how it matches up against what you're going to be leaning in. Daniel Jones needs that weaponry and that arsenal in order to be successful. He's going to be looking to air the ball out. In the balanced game of football, you have the run game that's going to help him really prop him up. But that's what we're also looking for as far as the conversation goes and comparing Bo Nix, right? Like I think Nix has a good ceiling and Jones has the experience, and then you have to have the command of the offense. What I think Daniel Jones does well is he's able to command that and run the game. There's like very little variance to how he controls the football. So by adding what you have there, and you pointed it out, like myself, Michael Pittman is someone, and Tyler Warren is someone that I have bet in heavily in this offseason heading into this game. And so you have to think about what's available defensively to combat that. So over and through the middle, I think that you already mentioned Talanoa Hufanga, but if you're looking into the secondary, once that shell is broken loose, you have Riley Moss, who's continuing to step up. His scouting was all based off the ball hawk ability, and now he's continuously finding his chemistry there in the secondary. So what I'm hoping for is that continues to grow. Had a little bit of injury luck that was negatively impacting his time with Denver and how many reps he saw. But I'm thinking the combination of Riley Moss and a Patrick Surtain is really defensive lights out when you talk about what you're looking for from a secondary. And then you talked about it, but I want to highlight that Jahdae Barron is not technically a starter here for the Denver Broncos. For as far as skill set goes, he could be a starter on a multitude of teams here in the NFL. But Jaquan McMillan, who makes a ton of plays for us, is actually getting more reps because he's that much better. So I just want to point out that that last minute turnover there for the Broncos last week was part and parcel of how good this defense is of causing havoc and creating and destroying any sort of offensive game plan that you have. And I know that sounds very high key, talking through the shade of orange glasses that a homer might, but on paper, the Broncos defense coming into this season was not just top 3 defenses. It really was neck and neck with the Philadelphia Eagles. And so I want to see that further implicate itself if they can continue to cause disruption. I will point out, though, and this is where I'm going to come back to earth, is that as we continue to work through the midseason of 2025, you could see that start to patter down a little bit. Like you're going to see injuries because they're a part of the game, but also sort of being in a burnout situation when it comes to this Denver Broncos defense, if they have to continue to carry the brunt of the pressure and the responsibility that comes with winning football games. And we've seen it in the past with these very great Denver Broncos defenses. More often than not, the offense doesn't stack up. And you see that frustrating factor of where they really aren't playing for the team anymore. I think Sean Payton's done a fantastic job of building that culture up here in Denver. And I don't foresee that happening specifically because of how he strategizes and also the empowerment that he gives Vance Joseph and the rest of the defensive staff to continue to keep that morale high. So something that I've seen in the past that still gives me a little bit of hesitation, but speaks so highly to what you're going to see Vance Joseph do is he is a complete foundational shift of what he wants to do with the defense isn't necessarily what Sean Payton's vision is for the team. So you're going to continue to see him running his game, taking the players and fitting them into the skill set. And then also the variability and the versatility you're going to see in his scheming is going to be what propels them further. So in a long roundabout sort of way, I think this defense is real, and you'll continue to see playmakers where if Pat Surtain removes an entire side of a field, you have the variability and the versatility in your defensive backs to play all over the place so that you're not solely relying on what a matchup would be. While we're here and while we're talking about it, I'm interested to note who you think would be matching up against Pat Surtain and how they're going to be able to handle that matchup. And conversely, who are they going to target then?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be ideally probably Michael Pittman Jr. would be my thought. He's been that number one receiver pretty much his whole time in Indianapolis, so I'd probably say him. Now, there are, like you said, if he does take him away, I think the good thing with this Colts offense is they do have other options. They do have Josh Downs, who in the slot he does his work, and he can easily have an 8 to 10 catch a game, depending on the certain matchup that he's in. I'm curious, who would be that slot guy for Denver's defense in that.
Yeah, that would be Jaquan McMillan. But that's the thing is, Vance is kind of one of those guys that's going to put different guys in situations, and that's where the Jade Barron pick just it made so much more sense. I know a lot of people might have been confused day one, like why are they taking a corner? They have all these great corners, but that's the key is when you face a team like the Colts, who arguably have one of my favorite skill position groups with Tyler Warren and Pittman and A.D. Mitchell, who is one of my favorite guys coming out, Mo Alley Cox, Downs and Pierce, like you mentioned. Like, you have all these offensive weapons. You have to have the defensive weapons on the other side to match up. And I think that's where Vance does a really good job of kind of mixing up those looks. Jaquan would be, like, if they were playing in their base defense or their nickel defense, Jaquan would be that slot guy. So he'd be the primary defender on Josh Downs. But there might be there might be a time where they put Barron in the slot with Moss and Surtain outside, or Chris Abrams Drain. He could even be a guy that they kind of slide in and out. So having that arsenal to match up with the offensive arsenal is so massive. And like Bree said, Hufanga is a guy that, we've been clamoring for someone to guard tight ends for years in Denver. And it's always a linebacker. Well, why not a safety? Why not a big safety who can act like a linebacker coming down? This is like the biggest thing that I'm looking at in this matchup is how the Broncos defense stacks up against this group. And, Tyler Warren getting 9 targets last week is not that's not a mistake. This dude is a baller. He needs the ball in his hands. And the fact that they use him in the slot, they use him in line, like so many different ways. And it's going to be really frustrating for Vance Joseph. But the Broncos, Riley Moss and Pat Surtain allowed a 42.7 passer rating when thrown to in week 1, lowest in the league. They shut it down on their respective sides of the field. And so you are limiting what an offense can do. And then you add in the pressure aspect. It's going to be a lot, but this Colts team has the weapons, and Jonathan Taylor is still producing at a really high level. Daniel Jones with his legs, like, I was a guy who wished Anthony Richardson would be like the guy. But Daniel Jones is still a high level athlete, and he's someone who can operate with his legs when needed. It's that added threat. So this defense is going to have to be on their toes every single down, making sure you're covering like really tight in the slot, because if you're bringing pressure, those routes from Josh Downs are going to be wide open. Tyler Warren's going to be open underneath. It's going to be a long day. I hope it's not an offensive shootout and like forcing Bo Nix to have to be in one of those situations again. But it's going to be really tough. And I think the Colts are going to make it tough on the Broncos secondary. It's just going to be about getting home.
Yeah, no doubt. You mentioned Jonathan Taylor, so I'm curious on that. Jonathan Taylor last year, I know, obviously in that game, Jonathan Taylor had over 100 yards. So he's able to, on any given week, do good things against any defense. Last week was okay for Jonathan Taylor. The interesting thing, guys, that I saw the Colts do that they really haven't done with Jonathan Taylor is they got him involved in the passing game a little bit more. They threw him a couple screens. They threw him a couple passes that last year we just didn't see with Jonathan Taylor. So I'm just curious how you guys feel about that matchup with a player of Jonathan Taylor's caliber, who we know any given day, he can break off he's just different. in a lot of ways. So how do you view Denver's and how they stack up here against Jonathan Taylor and this Colts offense that, they were all right running the football, but it definitely felt like there was some room for improvement last week, although they didn't have to rely on it a lot because, the passing game was so good last week against Miami. But how do you guys view that whole Colts running game, who I would still think the Colts want that to be their identity moving forward just because of what they've done in the past? How do you view that? I'm curious.
Yeah, I'll start us off here since we're sort of talking about what offensive game strategy looks like for both teams and kind of how they're probably going to want to start that emphasis sooner on. We've seen the same thing play out with the Denver Broncos as they consider what a ground and pound game actually looks like. Like I've been concerned with the composition of a running back by committee, but almost leaned into it. Now you're talking about Jonathan Taylor being so strong at what he's being asked to do that they're going to be asking more from him. And I think he is in a position to do so. So in the pass game, if you're looking for, check downs and swing passes, if Denver's loading the box, Taylor could see targets just as sort of the ability to keep the sticks moving. And I think in short passing concepts, Pat was talking about the screens earlier, it's just to counteract what you see when you see a heavy pass rush or a blitz, right? Short yardage receptions are not a thing to shake a stick at. I think what got frustrating in Broncos country is you never saw more outside of that, right? Is like, 3 yards per carry is really getting the job done. Well, if you resolute it to a 3-yard passing down and you convert on third, then I think you're looking at a better predicament when it comes to moving the ball down the field. So if Taylor is able to do that, it's less glamorous, right? But you've got also the ability to use them in pass protection. So if the team is bought in, and I want to relate this to what we've been seeing with the Broncos, is you're seeing skill positions being asked to do more than just what their role and position is. So if it comes to Jonathan Taylor playing a role not only as a pass catching back, but also in pass blocking, then I think that actually could be good for what the Colts are going to have to do against this Broncos defense, because we've been talking about front sevens all day, and how dare we not mention that the Broncos are deep. And I think that's something that they're going to have to consider to be able to control the momentum of this game. So I like what Taylor has been doing. I think that things to watch there is probably turnovers and what it means if the Colts fall behind early. I'm not trying to say it's going to happen, but it could reduce Taylor's usage. And I think if the lead is close, then you could see more workload. So it's funny how that plays out when you get into a contention of what is, I want to say, like, what is that feeling of lack, right? You have this scarcity mindset. If we have to play catch up ball, and then it's up to Jones having to air it out. And don't worry, is it Colts Nation? I don't want to offend the masses, but Broncos country has been there as well. And we know how that game goes. It turns into hero ball. And we have yet to really see if Jones has that ability to him. So I'd be interested to see. At the end of the day, Jonathan Taylor having a bigger role isn't the worst case scenario.
Right.
Yeah, and we can't forget, DJ Giddens also got plenty of carries as well in this game. So not having Jonathan Taylor carry the entire load for a season would be really, really nice, I think, for the Colts. But he's still a guy, like I said, who's producing at a high level. And we saw that last year. He's had his injuries, and we definitely know how hard it is to come back from those injuries. We had to watch Devontae Williams try to come back for the last 2-3 years. But for a guy like him, who is such a high level runner, especially between the tackles, I think just, getting him started early, if you can get a couple of chunk runs, I think the Colts probably feel a little bit better about, where their offense is going to be. But this is we keep going back to the Broncos defense. Zach Allen and DJ Jones are two of the best run stuffing D tackles in the league, and the Broncos don't even have Malcolm Roach right now, who is also in that upper echelon of run stoppers. It's going to be one of those situations where maybe they look at how they attacked this defense last year when Jonathan Taylor was able to break off some of those big runs, and they kind of go with some of those similar concepts. But now you have the addition of Tyler Warren and the addition of DJ Giddens, who will also help kind of open up some of those things in the run game, the play action game. And then, of course, we talked about the screen game. So maybe getting him involved in the pass game a little bit more it would be beneficial, but they're going to have to have somebody watching him out of the backfield. Do I trust Alex Singleton in that situation? Not really, because the running back wheel out of the backfield was the bane of the Broncos defense existence last season. It didn't matter who they had at linebacker. They just couldn't cover it. So I think that's an area where if you want to attack this defense, you gotta attack them where they're trying to attack you. So like we talked about, blitzes, those heavy pressure looks that they bring, that's going to be an area where, quick screens to the outside, little slip screens, middle screens, like that's going to have to be an area where the Colts come in and say, okay, we have to attack them here because otherwise it's going to be a long day for us. But I still think Jonathan Taylor is a great back in this league. I love that they got him some actual help. But it's going to be tough. This is going to be a hungry Broncos defense, especially coming off this win. They're going to want to prove that, hey, we're still the top dogs defensively in this league.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, let's switch it over here to Denver's offense real fast. You mentioned a little bit uneven last week. You would call it sloppy. So let's stay with that running attack real fast. So just looking at the pure stats, obviously RJ Harvey, who you guys drafted this year, he led the Broncos with, 70 yards, only had 6 carries though. So your primary guy, J.K. Dobbins, 3.9 yards per carry. I believe that was about the same as Jonathan Taylor was. How do you view this Denver rushing attack? I know we mentioned it already, but how do you view that and what Denver might try to do to maybe take a little bit of pressure off of Bo Nix coming into year 2 here and maybe try to help him out and make things a little bit easier for him against this Colts defense that took the ball away 3 times last week against the Dolphins and, pretty much pitched a shutout until that fourth quarter. So, they're going to be ready to go too. So just curious how you guys view this rushing attack and what they need to do in order to help the Broncos offense go.
Yeah, I think that the run game really got a slow start. I know we talked about it earlier, but I think it's really impactful when you think of, well, if we saw this in the second half of football, where has this been for the rest of the season? But it's just the slow start to week 1 football. But RJ Harvey led the team with 70 yards on 6 carries. But, that's offset a little bit with a long run of 50 yards. And I think that's okay. You're going to have those splash plays. You show a burst there, and then you partner that in with J.K. Dobbins, because I think a lot of Broncos country and the rest of the league thought maybe J.K. Dobbins was not long for the league. And I think he's here to proof positive that there's still an emphasis on what he can contribute as a lead back on a team. And the Broncos are trying to figure out what exactly they've had. They've had some missed targets here. Javonte Williams, who obviously fell to injury and then was really unable to get back to his former self, unable to really go through the evolutions of what his skill set is and strong, instead of strong arming defenses, just running straight into them. We're seeing, Dallas is kind of being able to right that ship there, but then they try and experiment out with Audric Estime, and that doesn't work out. They see him being cut, and now it's this emphasis of, are we building and developing the run game that we promised Broncos country, that we promised our quarterback? In year 2 of Bo Nix, the run game is absolutely part and honestly going to build the foundation of carrying him through any sort of sophomore slump and development here in the league. I feel like the Broncos are establishing the run. I don't know if they're committed yet. They're probably testing the waters a little bit and getting a little bit of the cold feet situation out of the way, but they have to eventually buy into it. They have to acknowledge that J.K. Dobbins has what it takes. They have to acknowledge that they invested in the pick of RJ Harvey to carry this forward. And what does it look like when you get other members of this offense involved, whether it be from the fullback perspective? And I know Pat probably has a little bit of a point that he could bring up there, but at the end of the day, you're trying to disrupt kind of what is the expectation out of this. And the run scheme also includes Bo Nix, but unlike last year, our lead rusher cannot be our quarterback as well. You can no longer place that responsibility on top of his shoulders, but I wouldn't be surprised if throughout this season you see a couple of those games peppered in where he decided to be that dual threat quarterback that I know he could be. I think what's being asked of him is to rein that in just a little bit more and figure out what the decision making looks like there. You don't have to throw yourself down the field if you don't have to. There is help amongst you, but you also see the ability too, as the Broncos really have tested what they're going to include when it comes to the run game, when it comes to a Tyler Bidet and a Jaleel McLaughlin. So they had their pick, and there was a fifth running back within that prior to the roster cut downs of Blake Watson, who was injured, where you could have seen the ability for the Broncos to even try to pull something up like that. Pat doesn't like that idea. He's not as high on it as I was, but the idea here is they had a choice. They had the precedent set there. I still don't love what Jaleel McLaughlin presents as far as a large rotation, but in small reps, I think it really adds to what the versatility of this run game really needs, and that is the short chunk plays. You mentioned it earlier for the Colts. If that's what gets you down the field, if that's what's converting your downs, it's better than being 3 and out. And we saw that. We saw that pre Sean Payton, and we saw that pre Bo Nix. We can't afford to play that type of offense. But Pat, tell me why Blake Watson wasn't high on your list. I'm kidding.
You know that I was the leader of the Audric Estime Run More Gap Scheme fan club. You know that. No, I mean, Sean Payton is a better man than me, because if I was calling the offensive plays in Denver, I would at least have 10 designed quarterback runs for Bo Nix every single game. I think this run game has to get established. They talked all offseason about, we're switching to more of a wide zone scheme, and it's going to be a transition. And they invest the draft pick in RJ Harvey, who definitely seems like he would be, a perfect fit for a wide zone or even just a regular zone run scheme. Broncos ran 14 gap runs to 9 zone runs in week 1, and I'm sitting here like, what are we doing, Sean? I thought we were switching things up, but apparently he wants to listen to me sometimes. I think this run game has to get going, but it's not just about the running backs. It is really about what is going on in the interior of the offensive line for the Broncos. Week 1 was, we said it was sloppy, but when we look back at the run plays, it was really sloppy from the interior. Too much pressure, not enough pad leverage, and just not getting the push that they needed to really open up some of these gaps. Especially when you're running zone, it's so imperative that you execute your blocking assignments to perfection. Obviously as perfect as you can be, but it just wasn't there. And so I think that's probably why they maybe called a little more gap heavy to try and move the Titans inside, literally. But J.K. Dobbins is a guy who is kind of a perfect fit for what they want to do in Denver. And I think as the season goes on, we're going to see it grow. I don't know if this is the week where it's going to pop off, but RJ Harvey has shown, even in the limited amount of carries, that he's a tough runner. Right now, sitting at 9.67 yards after contact. That big run kind of inflates that number, but our J.K. Dobbins is also sitting at 3.19 yards after contact. So these guys are going to run tough, and I think that was definitely a point of emphasis after having Javonte Williams in the Sean Payton offense for the last 2 seasons, where this guy is barely getting 1 yard after contact. So tough runners. But the offensive line has to be the ones that set the tone. And I know the Colts have a really good front. It's going to be something that I'm going to be watching for sure. How are they going to attack this defense? Where is the weak spot that they have identified? Can Luke Wattenberg and Ben Powers have a much better week than they had last week? Can Quinn Miners, continue to elevate his level of play? It seems like he has every single season. Where do we go from here? I think this is going to be one of those games where the run game is really tested. RJ Harvey is going to have to be on his P's and Q's, but J.K. Dobbins, the veteran in the room, he's got to be a guy that leads this offense, leads this rushing attack, because it can't be Bo Nix. Every time that the Broncos had Bo Nix as their leading rusher last year, they were losing that game. Just plain and simple. So he cannot be the guy. We have to get the run game more established. Like I said earlier in the episode, 40 passing attempts. It should have been more around 28, right? So they only really ran the ball with the running backs 22 times. 22 attempts is not enough. We got to flip those numbers, right? So I think that this might be a week where we get a little more run heavy so that we can get to the play action stuff. I feel like they were trying to get to the play action stuff without even establishing the run last week. That's not going to fool anybody. And we saw it both through 2 interceptions on play action plays where the defense was just sitting back and just waiting for him to throw it. So establish the run, establish it early, get Dobbins and Harvey going downhill, and make this a grinded out, tough football game.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. You mentioned Bo Nix, so I'm curious because I do feel like in certain ways the Colts and Broncos, at least schematically, they do a lot of similar things in the fact that they disguise a lot of things, they send guys on blitzes, they do that stuff. That's something we didn't see from the Colts last year. We haven't seen from the Colts in a while, but with Lou Anarumo and the new stuff that he's brought this year, with guys, and we'll see on Travarius Ward, he may or may not play depending. He has a concussion. We'll have to see on that. Not sure if he'll play. But regardless, you still have Kenny Moore in there. You have Xavier Howard, who I thought played well. You have Cam Bynum, who we all seen the celebration by now. So you have some guys who are out there who can definitely hurt you in that secondary. Off of a probably forgettable performance in certain ways from Bo Nix, how do you think that's going to look here against a defensive scheme that was able to really get to Tua Tagovailoa, confuse him a lot? What do you think that's going to look like for Bo Nix, and how does Denver need to get him back on track this week against a Colts defense that does similar things in terms of they're not predictable from week to week. They change things up. They send guys. They disguise things. They do similar stuff to the Denver defense in a lot of ways. So what do you think that's going to look like for Bo Nix in this passing offense?
I really love that you brought that up because that's one of the key takeaways is this coaching matchup. You obviously brought up Lou Anarumo, and this is it's an intriguing chess match, I think, of the week because Lou's defenses they're built to confuse quarterbacks. And so you've got disguised pressures. It's a big test for a young QB like Nix. And I think Peyton's been here before. He's seen that. And he'll script plays early on to settle Bo Nix. But it really comes from the ownership of, are you going to rely on easy completions, or are you going to allow a little bit of opening that scenario up? But I think the battle of preparation versus experience is going to be really important here. I'm trying to conceptualize avoiding like really big mistakes and avoiding turnovers, but to start the game, that's what you should be looking at is how do you play the cleanest football that you possibly can, especially against a tricky defensive coordinator. So if Denver wins the coaching battle, I think that's where you're setting yourself up for a lot of success. But I mentioned in passing kind of the higher ceiling for Bo Nix. This is the season where he has to prove that. It's not just a known. Like I've already mentioned how steady Daniel Jones is and what that's going to look like. But the way the Broncos are going to have to plan against that, which I'm going to lean very heavily on Coach Pat, who we have right here to explain what they have to do in order to do that. It's really a level of where's Bo Nix's confidence level starting and where does he end up when the tank is empty? And those two shouldn't be a correlative cause. They should not cause your quarterback to drop through the bottom. Pat, how do they avoid that?
I mean, right now, Thursday, Sean Payton has to be in Bo Nix's ear about his footwork because that was the biggest issue that I saw in week one, especially in the passing game. Never mind the fact that he killed like 10 run plays in the first, couple drives. Like that's a whole other conversation between him and his quarterback. When we just talked about establishing the run. I think establishing the run early, number one, that has to be the key because the play action stuff is not going to work if we can't get the run established. We're just running false concepts, right? Number two, it is the footwork. It's the mechanics. It's those little things. Why are you feeling skittish in a clean pocket? Why are you running, like throwing on the run when you don't need to throw on the run? Set your dang feet and deliver a good ball. But number three, it also comes down to the pieces around him and understanding everybody understanding what their job is and what their role is. There were a few times, and I know a lot of people, they watch the game, they have these instant reactions. Some of us will go back and watch the all 22 and look for certain things. I'm a person who goes back and watches the all 22, and I'm looking at body language. I'm looking at how people are looking on the field. Too many times in that Titans game were receivers not knowing where to line up, not knowing what route they need to run. We saw Bo Nix get on one of his tight ends because they ran the wrong route to the wrong spot, and it nearly resulted in an interception. These are things that Sean Payton has to get under control, but Bo Nix, as the quarterback and as the leader, also has to get under control. If you're about to face a defense that is going to give you exquisite pressure looks, disguise their coverages well, you have to be prepared. You also have to make sure that the guys around you are prepared. I think the biggest way that this offense can get on rhythm this week is just by hitting some of those short throws. I know Evan Ingram, we're not really sure whether or not he's going to play in this game. It's not looking likely. So that's a big loss for the Broncos offense. If that's the case, they don't really have another dynamic tight end in the room. And that's something that Sean Payton's offense desperately needs. You need someone who can be that check down that's not a running back, right? They need to get more quick stuff going. They need to maybe lean into the RPO world a little bit more. You talking about Shane Steichen. I love his RPO packages. Sean Payton has some dirty RPO packages as well. He busted them out against Atlanta last year, and it was one of Bo Nix's best games because it's allowing him to get those easy completions and get into a rhythm. I think that needs to be a point of emphasis as well. And it's double-edged sword. You can get the run game going with that, but you can also give your quarterback some easy opportunities to get the ball into the playmaker's hands. It's just about getting him on rhythm, get his confidence back up. He had a rough week last week. You're not going against an easy opponent this week either. So buck up, Buckaroo. Like, you got to figure it out because this is a team now that is well within their Super Bowl window. You spent all off season with your receivers, with talking with Drew Brees. And to me, week one does not show that you put in that work. Like, you are still making bad decisions that you were making week one of last year. Got to fix it. Got to get better from here. But it all starts with getting everybody on the same page. Same thing I would tell my high school kids. We all got to get on the same page, guys. Let's just get some quick, easy wins, build up our confidence, and then we can throw the ball 40 times. But this week, let's run the ball a little bit more. Let's get a little run heavy, get the ground guys going. Give the Hog Mollies some respect, man. They're working hard up there. Give them some work. They want to get the run game going. I think that's going to be a big major key.
Yeah, awesome. Well, really do appreciate your guys' time. What we always love to do here before we wrap things up is get your guys' score predictions here for this matchup, for what you think is going to happen here in week number 2, and then we'll let you get out of here. But I don't know who wants to start first with this prediction, but all right, Bree, go for it. Take us away.
I love how Pat just volunteers me for things. This is how it works. This is how it works on our own show too. That's all right. I think if the pass rush shows up like I feel they're going to do, and you already mentioned it, just a bit of a banged up secondary gets exposed. I think Denver's going to try to create some separation here. I don't think it's going to be world changing by any stretch of the imagination. And I don't think that the Colts are going to go, scoreless or not going to score a touchdown. I would say Broncos 27, Colts 17. And I say that is obviously stretching a little bit of what Vegas thinks the separation is going to be. So if you were to add or take away 3 points anywhere, I feel like that feels pretty much like home. But I'm going to go 27-17.
All right, Pat.
Look, the homer in me is going to come out. I think this is like we were talking about. This is a completely different defense than what Indianapolis saw in week 1. If we can even get half the pressures that we got against Tennessee, against Indianapolis, I think it's going to make life really hard for Daniel Jones. I don't think they go scoreless. I do think my hot take would be the Broncos get 5 sacks and an interception. I'm so sorry. Please don't come after me. And the Broncos end up taking it 21-6. Might be a little steep, but I think like with the pressure that they're creating, it's kind of bend, don't break. I mean, Tennessee only got into field goal range last week. They didn't really get close to getting into that end zone. So I think this is going to be one of those games where, they score, they put points on the board, but it's going to be really tough for them to see the end zone unless they really get Tyler Warren and Josh Downs going in the slot to counteract that pressure. And if Jonathan Taylor has a big day, I think that could definitely alter the score. But 21-6 is going to be my prediction. 5 sacks and an interception. That's what I'm going for. Call me a homer all you want. That's just how I see it.
I feel it. Hey, as long as the Colts are able to produce, I don't know, more than 130 yards of offense, I think they've got something going, right? So
right. Well, I mean, I guess I'm a little more confident in the Colts offense than maybe you guys are, because I know Miami's not a great defense, but we had a guest on here last week who was talking about how, oh my gosh, like the Broncos are going to just wipe the floor, or so the Dolphins are just going to wipe the floor. They're going to get to Daniel Jones all they want. And the Colts did a good job. I mean, to be honest, I didn't expect that offensive line to look as good as they did with 2 new starters in there. So again, it's a team that's fallen apart. So take that as you will. But I guess I have a little bit more confidence, especially with how good the Colts offense looked and compared to how much we thought they were going to look. But fully acknowledging, I do think that Denver does have a really, really good defense and, top 3 for sure. But I do think it's going to be a low-scoring game. I had in my mind, I think it's going to be a one-possession game. I think it's going to be a matter of field position. I had in my mind 20-17. I got to go with the Colts. I have to. I got to be the homer as well here. But I do think it can really go either way. Both these teams have a lot of talent. Both these teams, I love what they do on the defensive side of the ball. Both teams have questions at quarterback in terms of Bo Nix with his, obviously being a young quarterback, figuring it out. Daniel Jones, can he do it again on a consistent basis? We'll have to see on that. But, thank you guys. Really do appreciate you coming on and giving your insights here.
Yeah, no
absolutely. Really appreciate it. And I'm glad that you pointed it out there. I'm also looking at that Colts offensive line. Specifically, I feel like they're going to be able to hold it together. I'm glad you have Quentin Nelson. I was going to say the old guard. I meant it not in a disparaging way. But
he is,
yes, but still holding things together. I think that's helpful when you have 2 new guys to the system. But thank you for having us. We really appreciate it. And I've had a ton of fun, especially because you brought both of us along.
Time is a construct.
Yeah, absolutely.
Time is a construct.
Well, thank you guys. Good luck on Sunday, but obviously not too much luck because we're on this podcast. We hope the Colts take it, but really do appreciate it, guys. We'll have to do it again soon.
Absolutely. Yeah, anytime.
All right. Well, that'll do it for this one, guys. Again, shout out to FanDuel. Be sure to check them out for all the games starting tonight, Thursday Night Football, and all the games here coming up this weekend. But that'll do it for this one. Thanks so much. And as always, go Colts.